Shen is a pretty powerful tank with one of League's most iconic ultimates, and though he achieves his durability through some spiritual energy in his sword, he might not have been like that originally, just kind of tanking stuff head on. But how does the gameplay differ? How did they turn the tank ninja into more of a ninja who plays tank, while keeping him as iconic as he was previously? And also, what exactly was Rework? Shen was released in patch 1.0081 on March 24th, 2010, meaning he was released almost 13 years prior to this video. As mentioned, he was a tank champion, building items like Sunfire Cape, and even the aura item, Aegis of the Legion. His kit focused on sustain, defense, and crowd control, like many tanks did. As a ninja, he also came with an energy bar instead of a mana bar, meaning he probably wouldn't be building mana tank items like Frozen Heart or the later released Iceborne Gauntlet, but he could liberally use his abilities in fights and trades. Once again, there's a Riot summary of the original Shen that I can't not let you hear.
Shen is a ninja, adept at darting in and out of battles and distracting enemies. As a ninja, Shen follows 3 basic rules. 1. Shen is a mammal. 2. Shen fights all the time. 3. The purpose of Shen is to flip out and kill people. Over the course of this video, I will show you how to play a tank Shen. I try to build him with a lot of hit points, maxing out the damage output of his Key Strike passive, and making the most of Shadow Dash's taunt.
Early champ spotlights certainly were something, but let's finally look at Shen's original abilities. Shen's first passive was Key Strike, which had the original text saying, every 8 seconds, Shen's next attack deals bonus damage based on his max health. Being attacked by enemy champions makes this passive occur more frequently, which means the cooldown reduced when Shen received a basic attack. This gave Shen some extra damage scaling with his health, something tanks naturally enjoy, making him even better at dueling, especially together with his next ability. Shen's original Q was Vorpal Blade. It was a targeted projectile that dealt magic damage and marked an enemy. Allied units, including Shen, that attacked the marked target would be healed over several seconds. Shen's old W was Feint, which defends against the next champion attack or spell, blocking much of the damage from it. Shen's old E was Shadow Dash, which was a linear dash that taunted all enemies he passed through. And finally, Shen's old ultimate was Stand United. He placed a shield on himself and a target's ally anywhere on the map, and after a channel time, he teleported to the target's ally. Now, more recent descriptions of pre-rework Shen's abilities will not only help us understand what some of this actually meant in gameplay, but also what buffs and changes were made to Shen along the way. His ultimate, for example, lost its self-shield when Shen casted it. When it was still available, it was a more reliable escape tool, as seen in the champion spotlight.
Suddenly, Anivia and Ezreal show up and I have to make my escape. I try to stand united with our cardmaster, but he gates out right as I try to click on him. Instinctively, I exhaust Ezreal and then find Nidalee to land my teleport. Notice how the shield breaks and my health starts dropping right as I teleport out. The ultimate is a great escaping tool, but it comes at the price of a very long cooldown.
His passive also restored energy, dealt bonus magic damage, and had been changed from max health scaling to bonus health scaling, and these effects were added in 1.00134. Many changes arrived for all other abilities in this patch as well. His Q gained a new maximum health ratio for the healing, and if the Q itself killed a unit, Shen would gain a third of the total healing immediately, rather than over time. His W had some very fun patch notes, such as the patch 1.0083 notes, new effect, blocks all damage for 1.5 seconds, and new effect, blocks some damage from all non-turret sources. This was followed by new effect, works like a regular shield in patch 1.0087. Shen's E has remained pretty recognisable throughout his time on the Rift, though it did also restore 40 energy per enemy champion hit, and he would take 50% reduced damage by taunted enemies. What this leaves us with is a very durable champion with a lot of sustain, defense, and utility. Global teleports are such insanely powerful abilities that other champions with similar abilities, and of course the teleport summoner spell, have seen many nerfs over time, and yet Shen's ultimate endured. With his infinite sustain and being very difficult to take down, Stand United allowed him to have presence in teamfights that are literally happening on the opposite side of the map, while he's farming and split pushing. Though his damage wasn't top tier in the top lane, that durability and sustain with some health scaling meant he could be a real threat in battles of attrition that top lane tended to be. With this sustain came a somewhat suitable jungler. Shen lacked proper AoE, but his self-shield and healing gave such incredible sustain it meant that Shen was totally capable of farming the jungle. Forever. And just like with split pushing, he could gank by just ulting from the jungle whenever he saw fit. That doesn't mean he couldn't gank lanes normally with his taunt of course. To me, old Shen was one of the most iconic top laners of all time, with a powerful global ultimate and a near unrivaled level of defense and sustain. Of course, he could find himself in other roles sometimes, like the aforementioned jungle. Probably not necessarily the mid lane, though with some of his AP ratios that never stopped some people from trying.
Keep fighting, you got this, you got this, you got this. I will take the Batmobile from the Batcave. The Batmobile never fails.
Captain Shen Monsieur saves the day. Super Villain Nocturne alt will prevent you from entering your portals. Be sure to use your Superhero Q-Dodge ability whenever encounter. When using your blade on neutral minions, it will heal and save enemies as well.
But as tank supports came into the fold, particularly with the release of Relic Shield, Shen support became a decently popular pick. He had a good taunt ability, innate tankiness, no mana, could heal his lane partner by focusing on a target with his Q, and could work well with Face of the Mountain and other tanky support items. Shen's utility meant he could never be useless no matter where you put him, so much so you could even put him in the river. So what happened? Shen was a great tank, but there was something slightly off about him compared to the other ninjas in League of Legends. What kind of ninja tanks damage head on like that? Although the original W might have been some very old implicit dodging or magical ninja ability, and you could argue the same about his W shield, it's just not very ninja-like. Nor was donning a Sunfire cape and sitting on you for seconds, or minutes, to come. Theming aside, he was a very basic champion with targeted abilities and auto attacks making up most of his offense, besides a single dash taunt. In the reworks before him, Riot showed a lot of interest in making these more basic champions a bit more interactive, both to play and to fight. And so, a rework was released.
Our wills align. In-game, Shen is a beefy, energy-based tank who can take up roles in solo lanes, and the jungle.
Shen was reworked in patch 6.2 on January 28, 2016. I wouldn't say he looked very different, at least it wouldn't be my first choice of words. Better, I think, would be much more appropriate. The same couldn't strictly be said for his kit, as the new Shen has done away with many of his simplicities and introduced a very different aspect to his abilities, and that's in his new passive, so we'll start there. His new one is Key Barrier, which gives him a shield scaling with bonus health for 2.5 seconds whenever he activates his new Q or E, or when his W or R finish their respective charge or cast times. The second part of the passive is his new Spirit Blade, permanently tethered to Shen, which remains unmoving on the ground until Shen either commands it to him or moves too far away. Shen's new Q is Twilight Assault, calling the Spirit Blade to his location and slowing all enemies it hits. Shen gains empowered auto attacks after casting Q, and if at least one champion was struck by the moving blade, the bonus damage is increased and Shen gains attack speed. Shen's W is now Spirit's Refuge, priming his Spirit Blade for 2 seconds, which projects a protective zone around it if Shen or an allied champion move nearby. When it's active, all allies in the area will dodge all auto attacks. Shen's new E is Shadow Dash. Well, so is the old one. The differences now are the exchanging of the damage reduction and AP ratio for a bonus health ratio instead, as the energy refund is now a passive part of his E, restoring energy when Shen deals damage with his Q or E. Also, the speed of the dash now scales with his movement speed. Stand United also remains as Shen's ultimate. It's had its AP ratio nerfed by 5%, and just for clarity, the Spirit Blade will arrive with Shen when he uses his ultimate. Though E and R are pretty clean transitions from pre to post rework, the Q and W now revolve around the new Spirit Sword. How did we go from the old to the new in this instance? The easier one to do would be the old W, which was just a shield. Part of his weird identity was being a ninja that face tanked everything, but now his W will block all non-turret auto attacks to himself and his allies. It's not quite that his shield was replaced by the sword barrier, no. Instead, his shield is over on his passive, key barrier. After completing an ability's effect, he will automatically gain a shield that scales with health. He still maintains, however, that active shielding through active dodging with the sword though, very important in a lot of top laner, AD fighter dominated matchups. This way, his spirit sword is in a way more responsible for his defensive abilities, which makes a lot more sense thematically rather than just kind of eating the damage. His new Q has more skill to it than a simple point and click, but he still gains empowered attacks. He may not heal himself nor his allies anymore, but the Q empowerment is more powerful for the short trades Shen would like to take with his stun and W protection. While the infinite sustain of the old Q was a big part of his jungle identity, this role wasn't left completely untouched, as the Q empowered attacks deal double bonus damage against monsters, albeit capped. The team buff of the Q healing hasn't exactly been replicated in the kit, but the damage mitigation through blocking autos in his sword zone provides similar supporting effects. Since his E and his R were always his more important and iconic abilities, them being left nearly untouched means a lot of Shen's identity also hasn't changed. He is still able to split push and then teleport to the opposite side of the map, impacting teamfights with a sudden burst of shielding and landing taunts to both attack the enemy and to defend his team. And of course, Shen was still alright at ganking with his usual taunt, but a well-planned Q can reward Shen with a slow and some burstier damage than his previous incarnation was capable of. Jungle Shen may lack true AoE still, but the passive shield and dodging the monster's auto attacks made for some decent sustain. Now, Shen is unquestionably more skill intensive to play, making him more interactive for both sides. When things go perfectly to plan, Shen can do a surprising amount of damage with his Q empowerments, and he can tank tons of damage, with some more clear visual themes of magical ninja sword protection for his shield passive and his W. Of course, planning your sword positioning and slashing it through your opponents is a far cry from simply pressing Q on them. It wouldn't be surprising to hear if the Shen rework caused players to abandon the champion, as always would happen if you liked a champion for their simplicity. And I wouldn't blame you for it, as League is complicated enough already. In my opinion though, Shen has always been on my radar as a champion I'd love to learn to play. Though I dabbled in some old Shengal tomfoolery back in the day, I never really played the new Shen too much over the years, but have always respected it. I liked everything it changed, gameplay and thematics, and I could never be mad when a Shen outplays me in the top lane. And as well, I quite like the idea of Shen having to control and position his spirit sword, while Zed has to manage his shadows, with Shen's objects being more protective and supportive. I just found that to be a quite interesting and flavourful contrast. I think Riot did a great job at updating and upgrading Shen, and although I would empathise with those who enjoy a nice, simple tank champion, I can at least say there's no shortage of those in League today. But what's more important to me is hearing from all of you. How do you find Shen's rework, and what do you think of the previous version of him? Which lane would you prefer to play this versatile champion? Top lane? Down in bot lane as a support perhaps? Mid lane if you're feeling spicy? Or perhaps even the jungle? And maybe, just maybe, you'd play him in the river. River Shen was a playstyle that saw Shen take the river as a lane rather than anywhere else. Despite what some may say, playing jungle Shen is not the same, as River Shen would take Exhaust and Ignite in order to gank all three lanes as often as possible, with hopefully enough success as possible, as it's all he had. When a Scuttle Crab was added, River Shen would gain something in his lane he could actually farm, and before the rework, could sustain off with Vorpal Blade. As seen in the champion spotlight for the rework of Shen, Riot do recognise River Shen as a role, albeit only as an in-joke for those in the know.
Who can take up roles in solo lanes, the river, and the jungle.
And it's a slight stretch, but have you ever thought that the Crab Dash looked a little like Shen's E? In Legend, River Shen was said to appear on either team and snowball all three lanes to victory. In the lobby and in-game, their only words would ever be, River Shen. But that is merely the tradition legends past have foretold. What do you think of River Shen, and would you change anything about it if you were going to play it or something similar? For example, would you at least take Smite so no one can take your precious crab? Along with other video credits, I'll link The Legend of River Shen in the description below so you can see that in its entirety if you like. Thanks for watching, and please do leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you want. Shoutouts to the members OKJ, Nashborn, Light, AJBeat91, Warsquid, Genocide, Ultimate Ground, Kayle, Boblax, My Dad, N-Era, and Cat with AK for supporting the channel. Thank you again.